Neil, what's your take on Brexit? If you look at negotiations, and I want to then take your investment perspective, but do we follow it blow by blow, or do we just assume this is all game theory and that in the end we'll get something pretty plausible?
Well, I was a Remainer, but if in the end one had to come to terms with the fact that there was an appetite for divorce, at least in England and Wales, if not in my native Scotland. And I've come to terms with the prospect of Brexit. Having been through a divorce myself, I said all along that this would take longer and cost more than anybody who voted for Brexit had expected. I think that's turned out to be right. And it's going just like a divorce usually goes, with the other side opening with a large financial demand and saying it won't talk about custody of the children, as it were, until that's been settled. So that's predictable. I think there are two big issues which I don't think are given sufficient attention by markets as much as by commentators. Number one, I think there is a significant part of the Conservative Party that is prepared to go for hard Brexit. In other words, for there to be no deal and for Britain to crash out rather than to have a transitional agreement. That would really have massive market implications, not least for sterling. I don't think people are attaching a high enough probability to that scenario. Even more probable, in my view, is that we will end up with an election before it's due, because there is so much weakness in the UK government at the moment. The British system is not set up for the Prime Minister to be a despised figure whom nobody takes seriously. It's really almost impossible for government to run with somebody as weak as Theresa May now is. And I find it very hard to imagine that she is somehow going to carry on as the dead woman walking, in George Osborne's famous phrase, to the end of the negotiations and then somehow elegantly hand over to somebody else. I just don't buy that scenario. And the prospect of a Corbyn Prime Ministership, which is not implausible in the event of an election, in fact it's highly likely, should really put the fright on markets. So there seem to be two big downside risks before we even get to the finishing line of Brexit.
Well, it sounds to me like turmoil. James Bevan, that means opportunity within the markets. Where's the opportunity in investing in the United Kingdom right now? Is there an opportunity?
Tom, if you said there was turmoil reflected in prices, of course I would be raking over the ashes looking for the opportunity. The problem that we have is that markets are not yet taking seriously the risks. And I find this talk of transition very difficult to cope with in the context of what Article 50 really says, which is you have 2 years to finalise agreements, not 2 years to begin a transition. And therefore, this idea that it is within the UK's gift to determine what will happen is not correct. We have to see whether the EU is prepared to provide a different arrangement than that which is specified within the legal rubric. And I completely share Neil's perspective that markets are not taking seriously the challenges. And even if we have equivalence on day one, meaning that we have an agreement that we can carry on trading with the EU, we have to recognise that every time there is a rule change within the EU, we will then be required to abide by that or cease to trade in a particular good or service.